Eryn Knight, welcome to the Keto Camp podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited too. So we met through Danielle Hamilton. Shout out to her. We love and adore her. She connected us together. And then we hung out at KetoCon in Austin, Texas, which was super, super cool. And I was really impressed when you first emailed me about the company you work with, which is a good idea, some of the clinical trials and the backstory and your history working with NutriSense and just how you got to this point. So maybe you could share a little bit about your backstory and what you used to do, your transition, and how you discovered Good Idea.
Sure. Well, it started out, I think my blood sugar journey and blood sugar awareness started out working at NutriSense and seeing just how much blood sugar impacts your total mood, your metabolism, not just your waistline and your metabolism, but your mood, how you feel. And when I wore a CGM, I saw that what I thought was anxiety actually was my blood sugar. And I would eat a meal, my blood sugar would spike really high, would crash below baseline, and I would feel anxious, shaky, and just not well. And that whole time leading up to that point, I thought I had anxiety. I thought I had ADHD. I was medicated for ADHD as a teenager and kind of got off of that as an adult, but was on anxiety medication and found, oh, this is actually related to my blood sugar. And when I scan and see that my blood sugar is high, I'm feeling anxious. And when it's crashing low, I'm feeling down and moody. And from there, I worked with a lot of different thought leaders in the wellness space and fitness instructors as well, getting them set up with CGMs. And some of them saw the same. I had one individual reach out to me and say, I had no idea how much my blood sugar is actually tied to my mood and vice versa. And so there's really that lack of awareness, I think, until we see the data ourselves to realize, oh, how I feel is highly tied to all these other mechanisms within my body. And this is the first time we've ever been able to actually see that in real time. So I guess it started with NutriSense. From there, I worked in clinical trials at a clinical trials software company, helping clinical trials digitize during COVID because it was impossible to supervise sites. They were closed down to site supervisors who needed to gather information for their trial binders. So I worked there. And then, good idea, I was working with getting them on a podcast with HVMN and creating a blood sugar series podcast with Lat over at HVMN, who's a good friend as well.
Yeah, I love Lat.
Yeah. And so from there, I was sort of just helping different thought leaders and wellness leaders digitize as COVID was going rampant, and was connecting people for podcasts. And, Good Ideas founder said, what is it you do? We would love to have you join our team. And so that's how I came here. What I loved actually about Good Idea that differentiated it from other companies was the background in science. Before bringing this to shelves, they had already done clinical trials. They had already done 2 decades of research. And I found that very appealing, seeing as how there's a lot of companies that don't do that, and they throw some ingredients in something and say it has these benefits without actually testing and having data to back their claims. So that was what was unique about Good Idea. And, it's been a fun ride from here. And so I'm glad to be part of the team, glad to have met you and to still being in this space because it's truly a passion of mine.
I love it. Yeah, I could tell that it's a passion of yours. And how many people, especially children, have behavioral issues, and it's really just the diet that they're being fed. It's the vending machine, the cafeteria food, and it's creating these ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder. And I'm not saying that, diet alone is the cause for all of that, but it's a big part of it for many of these children and adults, and they get medicated with that Band-Aid, and they have no idea that it's their glucose being dysregulated. Just like you, Eryn, you had no idea. And if you don't test, you'll have no idea. Even for me, when I first started to wear a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, it was a game changer. I saw what exercise did to my glucose. I saw what poor sleep did, what good sleep did. I saw what a podcast interview would do, because I get excited when and my heart rate, cortisol goes up and glucose goes up. But it isn't until you start doing these experiments and testing on yourself that you really could fine tune things. And that's what you did with the CGM. And we love NutriSense. They're doing great work. And going back to Good Idea, you said the founder, 20 years, 2 decades of studying nutrition and understanding what's happening. And there was something really interesting that they discovered that helped with the creation of this, which was looking at whey protein and its response to glucose versus sugar. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. So our founder, our chief scientist, Dr. Elin Osman, she did 2 decades of research, 10 of those being at the Anti-Diabetic Research Institute. And prior to that, her PhD in applied nutrition, she studied fermented foods, and specifically fermented foods for glucose, like your glucose response. But while doing her research at the Anti-Diabetic Institute, she was looking at natural properties in food that help with insulin response, and specifically, as you said, whey protein and milk. And as we know, milk has a lot of sugar in it naturally. You know, if you had a spoon of sugar that had the same amount of sugar as a glass of milk, the spoon of sugar would spike your blood sugar higher than a glass of milk. Why is that? And she found, digging into that, it was specifically these 5 amino acids that are essential amino acids, the 3 BCAAs plus 2 other essential amino acids that were responsible. And perfecting those ratios, she found an even bigger benefit. And then pairing it with chromium picolinate, she found that an even bigger benefit in regards to insulin response. So this magic blend that's in the can of Good Idea actually was discovered studying protein and the mechanism that protein has on helping mitigate a blood sugar spike.
Super interesting. Yeah. So for those watching on YouTube, this is what it looks like. It looks like a sparkling water, right? And the flavor I have here is wild raspberry, and it has those aminos that you mentioned. It has chromium picolinate. It's a hard word for me to
It's a
say,
tricky
Eryn.
one.
Yeah, and it tastes pretty good. It tastes like sparkling water, and that was the thought process around it. But then it had to be proven that it actually works. So share some of the clinical studies and what this has been proven to do in a clinical study setting.
Yeah, so in the clinical trials, there were 2 different populations studied, one being an obese population and one being those within a healthy weight. And what was found was that when drinking Good Idea, a third of Good Idea can, 3 minutes before a meal and finishing it along with the meal, that blood sugar response dropped by over 20%. For some
That's huge.
individuals, even higher. Yeah,
Wow. So was that in the population of those who are unhealthy or healthy,
both.
or that's both?
Yeah.
Wow. So those who had a better response, did that happen in those who are unhealthy or healthier?
I think we saw it originally, and I honestly should review the documents, so I can't say for 100% sure, but were those that were obese.
Hmm.
But with a lot of the N of 1 experiments that people have been sending us, we're seeing people who are fat adapted or on a ketogenic diet are actually seeing an even larger decrease in blood sugar,
Wow.
postprandial blood sugar. Now, when I say decrease, I don't mean a decrease below baseline. We actually did an experiment, or this was actually a clinical trial, to see if while you're fasted, does Good Idea drop your blood sugar into a hypoglycemic state, or does it maintain, homeostasis or stay along your baseline? And we found that even drinking it fasted, it's not going to drop your blood sugar. So it's as if your body knows what to do with those aminos and chromium picolinate.
Mm.
But when paired with the meal is when we see the magic of Good Idea take place for the blood sugar aspect of it. We do see
Right.
people using it for other reasons too, though.
Yeah, yeah, I want to get into that too. And so you explain for those who missed it, the optimal way to use this product, this drink, is you drink 1/3 of it, 1/3 of the can, about 3 minutes before your meal, and
Mhm.
then as you're eating your meal, you finish the rest. And on average, they've seen in the clinical studies about a 20% reduction in postprandial glucose. Postprandial means after eating, and that's a good thing. You don't want high postprandial glucose because that'll lead to insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and a whole host of metabolic issues.
Right.
What is the optimal levels of postprandial glucose to aim for? I know that it's variable depending on where you're at, but what would be the goal to get to for postprandial glucose?
You're going to want to see your blood sugar come back down to a baseline of where you started. So, say you're fasting at 75. Within an hour or two after eating, you want to see your blood sugar go back down to that baseline. Um, and generally speaking, you don't want to see a crash below baseline after a meal because that could be a sign of like reactive hypoglycemia, for example.
That's what you had, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And also something Danny Hamilton works with people on. But
Yeah.
but you do want to see it return to baseline. And ideally, your fasted blood sugar or your baseline should generally be somewhere between 70 and 90 milligrams per deciliter, preferentially probably around 80. So you're going to want to see it return to that level. And you're not going to want to see a blood sugar spike that goes beyond 30 milligrams per deciliter in general. I think beyond 50 milligrams per deciliter, you're looking at potential vascular damage. So definitely not there, but it's all still a little bit gray because there hasn't been a standardization created for people who are not diabetic. So yeah, I'm just basing it off of sort of rules of thumb.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm going to break down for the audience. You said about 80 milligrams, 85 milligrams per deciliter. That's about 1 teaspoon of sugar in the bloodstream in a fasted state. That's the optimal amount of sugar that should be in the bloodstream in a fasted state. 1 teaspoon is about 80 milligrams per deciliter. I'm going to give an example here, how much sugar the body can hold. I have this in my notes actually. So 4 grams is about 1 teaspoon. That's what we want in the bloodstream. Anything more needs to be dealt with. And when you eat a meal, there's going to be more insulin that's pumped out to reduce that. And if that happens, acutely, and there's a good postprandial glucose response, good insulin response, no big deal. But let's face it, the average person, average American, is eating frequently and eating too many carbs. So they're getting a big insulin spike throughout the day.
Yeah.
In the liver glycogen store, in your glycogen liver stores, you could store about 25 to 30 teaspoons, and then skeletal muscle 100 teaspoons. That's just for the average American. It's going to vary depending how big you are, etc. But to give an example of the standard American diet, an acai bowl has 117 grams of sugar. That's a lot of sugar. People think acai
Yeah.
is a superfood. Orange juice, 16 ounces, has 52 grams of sugar. Starbucks frappe has about 11 teaspoons of sugar. And a can of soda has 9 teaspoons of sugar. So you can see how this is a problem. You could see why
Right.
88% of American adults are unhealthy. Diabetes is through the roof. We have a problem, right? So let's talk about the solution. This is one thing you can do along with keto and intermittent fasting. But is that something that lights you up, hearing me share how crazy the standard American diet is and
Oh,
how
yeah.
it's fairly easy to fix this problem?
Certainly. I mean, the average American consumes about 152 pounds of sugar per
Wow.
year, not in a lifetime, per year. And it's crazy how available it is to us now, but our brains are hardwired to seek it because, as we know, our entire body and brain run on glucose. We need it to energize our entire body. So we're wired for it. And so now, with it being produced and manufactured and put into all sorts of foods, it's around us all the time, and even in unexpected places, like even beef jerky brands have sugar, or a salad dressing that you would think is completely innocent has, sugar and maybe some other ingredients that aren't so great for us. So
Ketchup,
it
barbecue sauce, honey
yeah.
mustard, yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah. So even eating a salad and you think you're going out, that's one thing I did. I actually went to Chick-fil-A and had a salad because I was on the road and that was the only thing around. And I thought, well, this isn't ideal, but let's go here and see what happens. And, NutriSense can give you a scoring mechanism on how well that one worked or didn't work. And even the dressing itself had a bunch of sugar in it. And I had a miniature spike with a salad, which you would think chicken and salad with grilled chicken shouldn't be
Mm.
spiking our blood sugar, yet here we are. So it definitely is exciting to hear um, your enthusiasm for this pandemic of sorts that we're facing. As far as good idea being a tool, people can use that to improve insulin sensitivity. They can use that to help lower their blood sugar responses to meals. There are also other things you can do, like pairing your food with the right amount of protein and fibrous vegetables, not fast carbohydrates, but fibrous vegetables. And eating, if you are going to eat carbohydrates, eating them last. Eat your protein and your veggies and your fats before any carbohydrates if you are going to eat carbohydrates.
That's a
And
great tip.
yeah,
Fantastic tip. The meal timing on that is it works.
yeah, and walking after meals,
Hmm.
utilizing, the blood sugar that's available, and also intermittent fasting and extended fasting to start, the autophagy process, clean up your cells and start using up some of those glycogen stores, which can be a nice reset on your body to keep in routine.
Yeah, those are some great tips right there. Add a good idea drink to your meals. Start your meals with protein, fat, fiber, green leafy vegetables. If you're gonna have carbs, have it towards the end of your meal, and then go for a 15 to 20-minute walk. There's some research that shows it reduces the postprandial glucose, I believe, up to about 22%. And if yours also helps about 20%, that's 42%
Mhm.
if you think about it. And you will see that if you're testing your glucose with like a CGM or a BioCoach or a Keto Mojo or whatever you want to use. But testing it will be great because you're going to see everybody's going to have a different response. Some other use cases for this, I know people use it for exercise. So share a little bit about how this could help support a workout.
Yeah, I've heard some people are using it as a pre-workout. We've got some folks that are using it and are reducing caffeine intake. So they're taking it as a pre-workout. It also has leucine as one of the main ingredients, which we know is great for building muscle. And then, in addition to that, people are using it after workouts for a similar reason. And some people are actually using it to replace caffeine because it does help stabilize your blood sugar. Essentially, your blood sugar is your body's energy level. um, Too much of that and we crash because insulin overdoes it and then we feel yucky. Not enough, and then we're running hypoglycemic and we feel yucky. But stabilizing our blood sugar is what keeps us energized, and if we can keep that in a homeostasis, we're actually conserving our body's natural energy
Yeah, those are
with
some
it as
great
well.
cases, and it has leucine, so it will activate mTOR. And when you activate mTOR, when mTOR goes up, autophagy goes down. So it's
Right.
better to have this during your eating window, or understand that if you're going to have it during a fast, you might lose some of the autophagy benefits. But hey,
Right.
it could still be great for a fast as a crutch, because if your goal during the fast is more so keeping glucose and insulin low
Right.
versus getting as much as autophagy, then it's okay to have during a fast because you're still going to hit that goal. You're not gonna It's going to keep glucose and insulin low like you want. So it depends on what your goal is. And the caffeine thing, people don't want to hear that. That people don't want to get off their coffee. I love my coffee, and we could always test to see if coffee is jacking up your glucose or not. Test your blood glucose, before you have your cup of coffee or tea, and then about 45 minutes after, and see if you're seeing a 10-point increase or not. Some people don't get the increase, like I've tested, and my glucose stays stable, but other people might see a huge spike. So I had asked you this earlier, before we hit record here. What about somebody who has their cup of coffee, knowing that it spikes cortisol and glucose, but they pair it with the good idea? Could there be some cool testing there to see if it helps normalize the glucose response?
Definitely. And we've actually seen some N of one studies, which are when people test, they self test, and then they share their results with us. And one individual who loves their morning latte was seeing that they were spiking with their morning latte. And they paired it then instead with a good idea, and saw that their glucose spike was cut in half. And so, again, this was not a clinical trial where we had a giant group size. This is just an individual who shared their information with us to share, and celebrate a win. But yeah, we definitely see, for those who are sensitive to caffeine and see glucose spikes with caffeine, we are seeing some results that it's a helpful tool so that you can keep your coffee. And I know um, you don't want to take coffee away from folks. That's something that we don't try and touch.
Those are some bad words to people right there. If you're gonna have coffee, I always recommend having it an hour and a half after you wake up. Let cortisol drop a little bit. You don't want to really have caffeine when cortisol is high, and cortisol will be at its highest in the morning when you first wake up, and about an hour and a half after you wake up, 90 minutes, you'll see cortisol drop, and that would be the ideal time to have your coffee. And then if you pair it with good idea, that's even better. What about those who actually want to transition away from caffeine? What is excessive caffeine consumption doing to us?
Yeah, I would say for excessive caffeine, the first thing that I think of is cortisol levels being high and adrenal fatigue, right? We have so many stressors in the modern world. We eat at our desks, which is actually bad for blood sugar as well, because you're combining the stress of eating, and eating is a stress on your body, just like working out is a stress on your body. Eating while you're working is combining two stressors, which can actually spike your blood sugar as well. Or caffeine chronically, can keep your cortisol levels high, which we know high levels of cortisol can keep you from losing fat. And what happens when you drink caffeine is actually caffeine is the same shape as adenosine, which the adenosine in your brain is responsible for your feelings of tiredness. And the more hours awake you are, the more adenosine go into these nice little receptors and make you feel sleepy so that your body knows when to turn off and to rest. When we take in a lot of caffeine all day, caffeine is displacing that adenosine. So we aren't feeling tired And then our body actually can create more adenosine receptors as a response to that, which means we need more caffeine to stay as awake as the caffeine used to do. It stops working as well for us, and people become a little bit resistant, or I guess less sensitive to caffeine. And so when we drink caffeine, we're actually triggering cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine in our brains. And that's what is responsible for making us have that nice fight or flight mini response that gets us going for the day. But doing that too much can also fatigue our bodies. So, if you're having caffeine in the morning, then maybe afternoon you reach for a good idea when you start to feel a little low on energy. And we've also seen that people drinking it with their lunches are reporting that they're not tired after lunch. Those who've, normally felt that afternoon slump, so to speak, are seeing that their energy levels are stable instead of kind of crashing.
That's a good tip for those who feel tired in the afternoon. Don't reach for another cup of coffee or God forbid, a 4 hour energy drink. Don't even reach for that. Go get a good idea. If you have a good idea with lunch, you actually should notice better energy levels, because a big part of why people get that afternoon energy slump is they eat a whole bunch of carbs, they get that big glucose spike,
Yep.
and then that big drop, and they're like, oh, I need another cup of coffee. We call it cafecito time here in Miami, where people get their coffee with sugar in the afternoon just to get
Right.
an energy boost. That's not the best thing that you should do. What about the role of those who are struggling with cravings, especially those who are sugar burner, excuse me, and they're transitioning now to drop their carbs, do keto. Big part of that challenge is they still crave sugar and sweets. What role does good idea have with cravings for carbs and sugar?
Yeah, there are some studies on the ingredient chromium picolinate in regards to cravings and reducing cravings. There's a couple products on the market too, just for that, blocking sugar cravings and things like that. So chromium picolinate is an essential mineral found in broccoli and legumes, and it can actually help with satiety. And we haven't done a study on it yet, but we are planning to do one on a longer term one on that specifically. How does the chromium in the drink keep people from craving, and are they eating less between meals
Mm.
when drinking good idea? But there is research out there that has shown chromium to help with reducing cravings.
Yeah, interesting. That would be cool to see that research when it comes out. So another benefit is it might help with your cravings, not just the sugar issue, but the actual craving issue. Which, let's face it, it's a big hurdle for people. It prevents them from staying on course. They just have all these cravings. And you mentioned a tip earlier. Protein. Protein is very key, very satiating. It activates different satiety hormones and chemicals in your body,
Okay.
like cholecystokinin, peptide leptin, peptide YY, etc. So when you increase your animal-based protein, we prefer that animal-based versus plant-based. You get a nice effect where you feel full and satiated. That's why it's almost impossible to like overeat ribeye, but it's easy to overeat cake, because you don't get the same response with cake versus protein. So that could be something you add into the mix. And the flavor I have here is wild raspberry and tastes great. My fiance Natasha loves it. What's the flavor you have on your end, Eryn?
I have sea berry, which a lot of people are
Sea berry.
unfamiliar with. Sea berry is a synonym for sea buckthorn, which is actually a berry that grows wild in Sweden. And seeing as how we are a Swedish brand, we went with
Mm,
natural Swedish flavors. This one actually contains the powdered version of that berry. Um,
interesting.
and additionally, being a Swedish brand, we went very minimal on the ingredients. There's not sweetener, there's not obviously caffeine, as we spoke about. It's a very clean ingredient drink. So essentially, your sparkling water plus functional benefits for your metabolic health as well as your energy. And there's some electrolytes in there as well, and a little
I,
bit of a
I
zinc for immunity.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's right. It has zinc. This one has zero point 0.5 milligrams of zinc. I love, and there's potassium too. I love that how you just explained it. Sparkling water with functional ingredients. That's a great way to explain exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's sparkling water. I love sparkling water, but it has functional ingredients with the sparkling water, and it tastes pretty good. So those are two flavors. Wild raspberry is the one I have. Sea berry. What else? What other flavors do you have?
We also have a black currant flavor, again, another Swedish berry. And we have two coming out, which we haven't announced yet, but we
Mm,
will be announcing in a couple weeks. I can give a hint that one is a very popular citrus and one is a berry that's actually found here in the US as well as abroad. So I'll give those
okay.
hints, but be on the lookout for those in the next couple weeks.
Oh, a couple weeks. Oh, that's great. And you were so gracious to give my audience a nice coupon code, which is Keto Camp at checkout to get 10% off your order of Good Idea. Do you have like an option where there's mixed flavors in a batch that they can do?
Yeah, we're currently sold out on Amazon, or I'd recommend going there because we have an 18 pack normally there, but it's sold out. We should have that replenished and back in stock in the next week. But on our website, you can find black currant, wild raspberry, and the sea berry. And in a, right now we're a little low in stock on both black currant and wild raspberry, but we should be good after the next couple weeks because we're currently producing more.
That's a good problem. We'll drop a link for those listening or watching on YouTube. We'll drop a link for your website, which is goodidea.us, and then the coupon code is KetoCamp to get 10% off. So you could find that down below. So what's next for Good Idea? Like what is on the agenda? I know you have the 2 new flavors, you have a couple of new clinical studies, but what else is on the agenda on the horizon for you all?
Yeah, honestly, we're really just on a mission to help people with metabolic health. So it may be in the form that, I mean, our parent company is a venture AB, and that is a group of scientists who are looking at natural properties in foods that can better health overall. And they're currently working on new products as well. So there may be more from them. We're not sure if that'll go under the Good Idea umbrella or a separate brand. But we've also heard a lot of folks who travel say, we need a powder of this because I can't check these or put these in my carry-on bag. So we're working on a powdered version that may come out in
Cool.
the next year or so. And essentially, otherwise, we just want to make it accessible for people to be able to test blood sugar. So we're looking into what needs to change so that people can get CGMs over the counter and working with others in the community to help make that possible. So not just about the product and what we have created, but also about better health overall. And we're on a mission to support that movement in general.
It's fantastic. It's so needed, especially with the nasty stats out there with diabetes and obesity. Harvard came out with a study, I believe just last year, that showed they're predicting by the year 2030, which is 8 years from now, that 1 in 2 American adults will be classified as obese. Okay. Not overweight, but actually obese. So we have a problem. I know that, my dad back in 2013 suffered a massive stroke from diabetes, the complications of diabetes. And he had type 2 diabetes for most of my life. He ended up passing away. But if he was around right now and he still had his type 2 diabetes, like I would buy a whole bunch of Good Idea and tell my dad just to drink this with all of his meals. Like if you're watching and listening and you know somebody who's diabetic in your family or a friend or a coworker, like buy them this. You don't even have to explain the science. Just let them know, try us. Let's see if they like it.
Mm-hmm.
And just say to have one of these with a meal, like just doing that. And then eventually you could add in some other things into the mix, like we spoke about, keto, intermittent fasting, protein and fat to start your meals, walking after your meals. But just doing that one thing in the beginning could be the thing that could kickstart somebody in the right direction. Would you agree, Eryn?
Yeah, I think that's great. And we actually have seen that too with one of our customer stories. I actually had the pleasure of speaking to one of our customers named Chris. And if you want to read the story and her quotes exactly as they are available on our Instagram, which is at Good Idea US, one word. But she went into her doctor and was shocked to find out that not only was she pre-diabetic, but she actually was in the type 2 range. And I believe her fasting blood sugar was 244 milligrams per deciliter,
Wow.
and her A1C was at 9. And she begged her doctor to not go on metformin. She didn't want to go and take medications. She wanted to see if she could fix this naturally. And at the time, she was able to get Good Idea and to get her doctor to kind of sign off that for 3 months she had to fix this problem. And then after that, she needed to go on metformin. So she stopped eating naked carbs was her first thing. She started going on nightly walks, and she added Good Idea to some of her meals. And I wouldn't even say it was every single meal. And with those 3 things, her A1C went down to 5. And her doctor, after the 3 months said she didn't need to go on metformin, but just to keep watch because she, of course, is at risk for it to climb back up there if she stops managing it properly. But that was a huge win for us as a company to see something like that happen and to be able to support her on her health journey along with the other lifestyle changes she was making.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that. I love that story. And the great thing about type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is that it's fairly easy to reverse. It really is. It requires a few lifestyle changes, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. It's not what you've been told by the American Diabetes Association. And I'm saying that, Eryn, not good idea. I'm saying that the American Diabetes Association is the exact opposite of what you should do. They're telling you that we could manage it, and the same diet they promote actually contributes to the progression of type 2 diabetes, which is ridiculous. And the mindset is it's okay. I'm taking insulin and I can have all the carbs I want. I just have to increase my insulin. And that's going to make things worse. And people are not even dying. It's really rare to die from diabetes. They die from the complications of the diabetes. It's the strokes, the amputations, the infections, the kidney disease. That's what kills them. But
Right.
diabetes develops over years. Type 2 diabetes develops over years. Like the individual you just mentioned, I mean, a A1C of 9 plus, a fasting glucose of 200 plus, that didn't happen overnight. That didn't happen in a couple of years. That happened over several years. And if you're testing your with your CGM or your biocoach or your glucose or getting a fasting insulin done, man, you could have put a dent in that years ago without it ever having to progress to that point. But if it does progress to that point, it's fairly easy to go back to an optimal state. And that story was a perfect example.
Yeah, yeah, it really is good to just stay proactive instead of reactive, and to see it as a preventative measure you can take today by making sure you're staying on top of your stress levels as well as your lifestyle. I mean, I think we live in such a fast-paced life now that it's easy to forget that sugar, obviously increased sugar intake is one of the causes, but also stress and poor sleep. And a lot of people are, running on a few hours of sleep, and maybe they're not eating a ton of sugar, but they are eating some carbs, and they're not managing their stress. Their body's not going to be able to respond like it needs to in order to keep blood sugar at bay. So, actually, my father got diagnosed with prediabetes, and he doesn't eat sugar at all. He doesn't love sugar. He likes pork rinds, and meat. And but he was struggling with blood sugar,
Mm.
despite that, not being a huge, carb heavy eater. But he has high levels of stress and hardly sleeps. And so getting that under control is really, I think, a crucial factor that some people um, don't pay attention to as easily. And it's pretty easy to point at sugar as the main culprit, and it definitely is a big culprit. But you need to make sure you're also recognizing other factors that, you don't sleep well, your body's not going to be able to respond well to insulin. And if you're not, properly managing your stress, your cortisol levels are going to be high, inflammation is going to be high, and your body is going to struggle again to take glucose into the cell and do all the things it needs to. Another factor that I think is interesting just to sort of explore is all the other downsides of high blood sugar. It's not just about your waistline. It's not just about mitigating risk for these diseases, but also how it impacts skin, like glycation. A lot of people are shocked to hear like you can actually dramatically increase your risk of getting wrinkles and sagging and, getting pockets of cellulite on your body. And that's not really a fat issue. That's your skin breaking down the elastin. And that's a process of glycation that's created by excess blood sugar. So I find all of this really fascinating and interesting, just how it all pairs in within the body.
Yeah, it is fascinating, and we could do something about it. There's so many solutions. This is a very practical solution. You just add this drink to your meals, and it'll help get you on your way along with the other changes. That's why I always say, if you want to age faster than anybody you know, eat every 2 to 3 hours, eat a whole bunch of carbohydrates because the glycation that occurs, and we don't want to do that. And a simple solution is to, of course, intermittent fast, keto, but just add one of these good ideas to your meals. And if you can learn more about it over at goodidea.us, use Keto Camp at checkout. Anywhere else you want to send them, Eryn?
Check out our Instagram if you'd like to see actual glucose data of people who are testing meals with Good Idea. And feel free, if you run a test or an experiment with a CGM, to send us if you'd like. We will give you a shout out on our social or in our newsletter.
That's awesome. And I know that Danielle Hamilton has done some cool tests. So her Instagram, you might want to check out her Instagram as well. She's been on the podcast before. Danielle Hamilton Health at Danielle Hamilton Health at Good Idea. US and then goodidea.us. And yeah, share this episode with a friend. Buy a pack for somebody you know who has type 2 diabetes. And Eryn, great job to you and Good Idea. I love what y'all are doing. I'm excited for the 2 new flavors, and I'm excited to chat again in the future with you.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure it's been to be here with you, and looking forward to sharing those new flavors with you all.
Can't wait. Talk to you soon, Eryn. Thank you.
Cheers.